Hello, my name's Gavin. This is Genre Books. I hope you've had a good Christmas, or at the very least had a chance to get your feet up and your nose into a book. This is Sunday, so is the weekly roundup of what I've read towards the Read What You Own challenge. Briefly, the Read What You Own challenge challenges you to read a certain number of books from your own shelves before you buy a new one. There are levels of this challenge: 25 books, 50 books, 100 books. There is a page count option if you don't want to go on number of volumes. I'm going for the 100 books. This is the platinum level challenge, and last week I got to a third of the way through the required reading. The first book I finished this week was one I showed you last week that I had nearly finished. I had about 100 and something pages still to go, but this is Sunless Solstice, and I was reading this as part of the Revenant Reads sponsored BookTube event to resurrect Victorian ghost stories, the tradition of Victorian ghost stories. Not every story here is Victorian. The first few are, but then we go into the Edwardian period and beyond. Not every single story is a winner, but there are certainly more hits than misses. I particularly enjoyed the stories from Lettice Galbraith, Hugh Walpole, Daphne du Maurier and Muriel Spark, but I don't think I could single any of them out as being weak. There are just some much stronger stories than others. This is the third of the British Library Tales of the Weird Christmas specials. There is now a fourth out, and maybe once this challenge is over I will get it for myself, so that I have another one of these to read Christmas 2025. About a month ago, I read the first novel in this anthology. This is the Andromeda Anthology by Fred Hoyle and John Elliott. I was reading this as a buddy read with Duncan from Back Away from the Donkey, and we had a discussion on his channel, which I will link below, to talk about the first of the books here, A for Andromeda, which started life as a BBC science fiction serial in 62, perhaps 63, and a book which followed, A for Andromeda. I think we figured out that A for Andromeda is the first science fiction novelization of a TV series. But the book I read this week is the second book in this anthology, Andromeda Breakthrough. Again, this is based on a BBC serial. The original serial, I think, apart from one episode, is lost, as the BBC was wont to do back in the 60s. But the second serial remains. I've not yet watched it. I've watched part of the first episode, and I hope to get the remaining episodes watched in the next few days, because next weekend I'm having another discussion with Duncan from Back Away from the Donkey about the second book here. I enjoyed this one more than the first book, but I'm going to be very circumspect about what I'm saying, because I will be talking at length about it next week. I don't know what I was expecting from the next book, but whatever I was expecting, Deeper Than the Darkness by Gregory Benford surpassed those expectations. This was a pleasant surprise to read. It's 2 parts hard science fiction to 1 part new wave fuzziness. I was expecting the hard science fiction. I was not expecting the new wave element, but this is Gregory Benford, here under the name Greg Benford, his first novel. So Perhaps a learning experience for him, and relying more as he went on the strengths of his hard science fiction writing, maybe more just following the mores of the time as the influence of the new wave ebbed as we got further into the 70s and then the 1980s. But I enjoyed the mix that was here. I think I enjoy sometimes hard science fiction, but a big long book full of very technical discussions about exactly why something that was happening is able to happen is not always the best narrative driving force. And what this book supplements the hard science fiction with here is community. A sense of community, a sense of being the outsider in a community, in an Earth far into the future. There are no more Europeans or Americans. The dominant culture is Chinese, almost Mongolian, certainly Mongolian, medieval Mongolian in its colonizing aspect and rapacious behavior. But our main character is not of that dominant genetic strain that is ruling the planet. He's worked his way up into a position of authority. He is a captain on a shuttlecraft. And when I say shuttlecraft, these craft are much bigger than what you are perhaps thinking. But his junior officers don't respect him. He can see out of the corner of his eye the insult mouthed by them. He knows the rumours that go around behind his back, and he knows that people are out to get him. And there is an opportunity for his second in command to do so, and that happens. Unfortunately, the result of his orders being countermanded is the interstellar war humanity is fighting against the Quan is undermined, and they begin to lose, and lose badly. They lose so much that even a disgraced officer like himself, years later, is called back into service to act as the governor of a far-flung colony. And here is where the story gets interesting, and I should probably shut up about it. And finally, this week, yes, it's my battered old Kindle, and possibly one of the last times you'll see my battered old Kindle. I read After London by Richard Jefferies. This is a Victorian post-apocalyptic book. This book is set in what was once Britain. And a long time after the apocalypse, we have reverted to feudal baronies, warring tribes, and marauding gangs in the forests. It isn't explained exactly what the apocalypse was, but the first section of the book talks in detail about, in this empty world with few humans left, how nature reclaims the land. And Jefferies goes into some detail about how farm animals evolve or revert, how cows can exist without their closer links with farmers, how the pigs are easily able to adapt to the new reality. The buildings and the infrastructure of Victorian England are piece by piece dismantled by a resurgent nature. This part of the book is stunning. We then lead into the next section of the book, which details the human society that now exists many centuries later. There is still language, there is still a history. People know that there was such a thing as London, but very, very few people read. There is no production of any new reading material, and those who are fortunate enough to be educated are the only people that know the full story, that there was a much more technologically advanced civilization before them. Our main character is Felix. He is the first son of a small, fairly insignificant nobleman. First son he may be, but he is not really cut out to be the one to inherit the title. His younger brother, Oliver, is much more of the ruling kind of person. He is much more physical, charismatic, just in general the favoured child. Felix is a bit of a wet blanket, if truth be told. He doesn't want for courage, but he displays it in odd ways, and he goes out on a quest to basically impress the daughter of a neighbouring nobleman, but also to demonstrate his technological savvy. He has created his own boat. He knows some tricks from the reading he has done. He doesn't often put these things into practice, and he lacks common sense on any number of occasions. The amount of times he lands on his feet only to attempt to trip himself up shortly thereafter becomes a trifle annoying. But to give him his dues, he perseveres, and he reaches his destination, the site that once was London. And those few chapters are a bit spooky and quite affecting. There are some great bits to this book. The medieval, almost fantasy-like story in the middle is a little bit incongruous, but I suppose, written in the Victorian era, it's no less innovative than the post-apocalyptic aspects of the book. I only finished it earlier today, so I'm still processing it. I know I like it. I think I like it quite a bit. I'm not sure it's one I go back to reread, but it's one I certainly want to cite as an important work, especially if you enjoy reading post-apocalyptic literature. I have also been reading, although I'm probably less than a quarter of the way through, Sim's Theory of Concentric Spheres, which I am reading on my new Kindle, new bright shiny, old battered. Sim's Theory of Concentric Spheres, written by James McBride, is not something that I would class as a page turner. It's 200 years old, and it very much reads like it. It's spurious science, pseudoscience. This is an acolyte of Sim's writing, so we are meant to believe, and he is trying to prove the theory Sims has proposed, of which more later as I disappear down my project rabbit hole in 2025, or up my own project rabbit hole, depending on your point of view. But here is the list. Not much more added in the last week, but another 4 titles there, closer at least to the halfway point, if not the finish line. But one last piece of housekeeping. The Gregory Benford Deeper Than the Darkness was my last pick from the tote bag of my old Peril. This is the tote bag of mild peril. In here, on slips of paper, are the names of every single book in the shelves behind me, as well as about 100 genres and subgenres of literature. Depending on what I pull out, I'm either going to be reading that book, I'm going to be reading the series that book is part of, or I'm going to be having an episode of this channel talking about that genre or subgenre. And it could be anything. I could be picking out a virtual pamphlet of a book which I will get read in an afternoon. I could be picking out War and Peace, the complete works of William Shakespeare, or The Wheel of Time. Any one of those things is probably going to send a literary torpedo straight through my reading plans. But I have determined in one of the first things I did on this channel that I will be reading whatever I pull from this bag. And Russell, the next thing I will be reading, No Highway by Neville Shute. So I will be getting to that, hopefully, in January. I didn't use a tote bag as much as I had intended to in 2024, and it is one of my many plans or resolutions for 2025 that I will try to be a little more disciplined with myself with these picks. So I'll find No Highway from Neville Shute and get that read. Until next time,